Has been charged with murder and abandonment. The body of her 2-year-old son, Tariq, was found in sand dunes. Neighbors have described Jacobs as good-hearted. Jacobs has been undergoing psychiatric evaluations. She has abandoned her bail application.
Community members demanded justice for the 2-year-old boy. Jacobs had reported the child missing on the 29th of December. Tariq's body was found behind a school in Beacon Valley a few days later. Outraged protesters, many of whom helped to search for the boy, say they are angry and disappointed.
It's not a nice thing to see that a baby is killed. A child cannot defend himself.
Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, and thank you very much for joining me here again today. Last week we spoke about the absolutely gruesome murder of Hillary Gardy, and once we know more about that case, we will do an update about what the outcome is at trial. And hopefully police and the trial can uncover what really happened to Hillary on that day, and also to find out whether it was politically and or criminally motivated. But we'll just have to wait and see. But today we are talking about another case that is also subscriber suggested, so thank you very much. But today's case, I think, will leave you absolutely torn, heartbroken, and confused, because today we are talking about a case that we shouldn't have to talk about, but here we are. But this is the case of young Tariq Jacobs, but his life was sadly taken by someone who he should have been able to trust, and who should have been able to take care of him. So, with that being said, let's get into today's case.
Intended for mature audiences only.
Today we are heading to the beautiful Cape Town and to an area called Mitchell's Plain, which is in the Western Cape province of South Africa. And we are shifting our minds back to 2012, specifically the 29th of December 2012, when a young 2-year-old boy named Tariq Jacobs and his mom, Zulpha Jacobs, headed to the shops out in Mitchell's Plain. Zulpha and young baby Tariq headed out to the shops because they were going to grab a few things, and then Zulpha was going to head to her grandmother's house for the day. And Zulpha said that Tariq and her were absolutely inseparable. Tariq went absolutely everywhere with his mother, and Zulpha would also joke and say that Tariq was basically like her husband because they were inseparable. Zulpha would also describe Tariq as an incredibly sweet, gentle young boy, and he would do absolutely anything for his mom and dad. Zulpha worked as a lifeguard, and she also worked at or ran a creche, and this is what she would do for a living. At the time, Zulpha was either 35 or 36. Some reports say that she was only around 30 years old, but let's just say she was in her 30s. So Zulpha was in her 30s, and she was married to a man named Walid at the time. Walid and Zulpha were married for around 7 years, and like I said, they had a 2-year-old child named Tariq together. Some reports say that Walid was around 25 years old, and some reports say that he was closer to Zulpha's age at 30, but he definitely was younger than Zulpha at the time. So, like we said, Zulpha and Tariq were at the shops, and then they were going to head to Zulpha's grandmother's house for the afternoon. So before 10 o'clock on the 29th of December 2012, Zulpha and Tariq were already at the shop. So Zulpha and Tariq are then done what they need to do at the shops. They then head out towards the taxi rank, where they were then going to catch a taxi to Zulpha's grandma's house. But then, all of a sudden, Zulpha said that she turned around for a second, and when she turned back, Tariq was gone. Zulpha then dropped everything. She started panic looking around. She tried to ask people if they saw her son, and she was running around trying to look for baby Tariq, but he was absolutely nowhere to be seen. The people at the taxi rank apparently tried to help Zulpha find Tariq, but no one knew where he went. He simply just vanished into thin air. Zulpha then continues to try and look for Tariq, but she soon came to the realization that he wasn't here anymore. She then quickly ran to the nearest police station and reported baby Tariq missing. Police immediately put out an Amber Alert for Tariq, and they hit the ground running with this case. They went straight to the taxi rank where Tariq was last seen at around 10 a.m. on the 29th of December, and they also took the CCTV footage from the taxi rank to be able to look at later in the day. But police said to Zulpha that it's best to just go home right now, let your relatives know what's happening, try and maybe gather up some people to come and help, but you need to go home and let us try and do our job here at the taxi rank and in the surroundings. So Zulpha did exactly what she was told, and she then left the taxi rank, she left the police station, and she headed home to tell her family the absolutely devastating news. When she got home, she told her sister, her aunt, her mother-in-law, and her husband Walid exactly what happened. Walid was apparently absolutely devastated by this, and the family were really praying and hoping that they would see their baby boy soon and unharmed. Now, before we get into exactly what happened, let's talk a bit more about Zulpha and Walid. So like I mentioned earlier, Zulpha and Walid were married for around 7 years, and the couple was not wealthy by any means. The couple really struggled month by month, and they really struggled to make ends meet. There were also reports that Walid and Zulpha's marriage was a very unhappy one, and by the time that Tariq was actually born, they had already separated twice, and they weren't really living together at the time that Tariq went missing. Zulpha would also say that she really tried to please her husband in any way that she could, but it was never good enough, and their marriage was really rocky from the start. Zulpha would also say that she would try and steal things for the family just in order for them to eat. So when Zulpha went on to tell the Jacobs family and her family exactly what happened that day and that Tariq was missing, like I said, they were hoping and praying that they would see him come home unharmed. But sadly, that would not be the case. 2 days later, on the 31st of December 2012, they found the lifeless body of Tariq Jacobs behind some bushes near Imperial Primary School in Beacon Valley. The families were absolutely distraught, and they were thinking, who could do this? Who could harm an innocent toddler? Why would they do something like this? And what kind of person would do this? So while the family was grieving, police were first thinking they were looking for a missing child, but now they were looking for a murderer. So police investigations were completely ramped up. They were on high alert, and they worked very quickly. And remember, I mentioned earlier that the police took the CCTV footage from on top of the taxi rank, kind of near where Zulpha said that her and Tariq were standing. So police started looking through this footage, and they were looking to try and see where Zulpha and Tariq were, and they did find them on the CCTV footage, but they noticed that Zulpha wasn't running around panicking looking for Tariq. They actually noticed that she had Tariq in hand, and they'd left the taxi rank together. Now, police did find this a little bit strange, but they wanted to clarify everything up with Zulpha to maybe see if she left something out. So in order to get the story straight, police headed straight for Zulpha's house in order to just talk to her about that day on the 29th of December 2012. So police are at Zulpha's door, they're knocking on her door, she opens up and she sees police standing in front of her, and they are just now asking specific questions about what happened on that day. Zulpha apparently gets very flustered, and then she confesses to police that she was the one who actually murdered her son, Tariq. And Zulpha was then arrested on the 2nd of January 2013. When Zulpha was sat down in the interrogation room, police asked her to tell them exactly what happened, and this is what Zulpha had said. When being in the interrogation room, police asked her to recall the 29th of December 2012, and she said, quote, "Oh, that awful day, December 29th. Zulpha then takes a breath in and says once again, "We were walking past the sand and bushes, and I sat down and Tariq was sitting next to me. I was crying, thinking about where my life is now and what I went through for 7 years with my husband. By the time I realized what I had done to my son, it was too late. I couldn't believe that I had just killed my son. I didn't know what to do. I closed him up in a jacket, covered his feet because I didn't want him to be cold. I then ran to the police station to tell them what happened. But when I got there, the words couldn't come out of my mouth, so I said my child was missing." When police asked Zulpha exactly why she did what she did, she said that her husband was going to leave her and he was going to take Tariq with him. And she, by any means, was not going to let that happen. Zulpha then went on to say, quote, "I miss Tariq so much. I think about him every day, what we used to do when he was alive. He was everywhere with me. I never walked anywhere without him. It was as if he was my husband. But in my marriage, I did everything that a wife would do, should do to keep my husband happy. I started stealing for him and his son so that we could survive." End quote. So Zulpha was basically saying that her unhappy marriage drove her to do what she did, and because she was in such despair was why she did the despicable things that she did. Apparently, Zulpha also wrote quite a detailed letter about why she did what she did, and she wanted to give this to her family and the Jacobs family in order for them to understand and really get into her mind as to why she murdered her son. Zulpha then wrote this while she was in prison at Pollsmoor, and when they would come and visit her on Tuesdays and Thursdays, on one of the Thursdays that they came to visit her, she handed this letter to her father. Zulpha does say that her dad isn't doing very well after reading this letter and also because of the pending trial, and she said that she feels like she's going to give her father a heart attack because of what she did. Zulpha's trial was going to take place later in January of 2013. And police were not only now looking at Tariq's autopsy, they had also discovered another anomaly, which we will get into a bit later. But firstly, Tariq's autopsy came back and it is absolutely devastating. Basically, Tariq passed away because of suffocation, and because there were absolutely no marks on Tariq's body, it seems as though while Zulpha and Tariq were sitting next to each other by the dunes, Zulpha then apparently took her 2-year-old son, placed his face deep into the sand on this dune and suffocated him to death, before then wrapping his body in his blanket and then covering his feet with newspaper. But the anomaly that I was talking about was that Tariq was not the first child that Zulpha had, and also not the first child to have passed away before or after the age of 2. Zulpha had 2 children prior to Tariq. In 2001, Zulpha's first child, a daughter, aged 1 year and 9 months, died of a suspected cot death. Apparently, they said that the young girl was being fed porridge before suddenly her lips started turning blue, and after she started eating this porridge, she then passed away. Then in 2008, Zulpha had another child with her then husband Walid, and they had a boy who was 2 years old, and he apparently drank liquid that was used to clean CDs with, and that's how he sadly passed away. So not only were police investigating the death of Tariq Jacobs, but they were also investigating the death of Zulpha's previous 2 children, and some reports say that their bodies were exhumed, but this is unconfirmed. But then in January of 2013, near the end, Zulpha Jacobs' trial started, and her family planned to support her throughout this trial, and they said, quote, "It doesn't mean we support what she did. She confessed, and whatever she did, she needs to be punished, but we'll be there to support her," end quote. And not only were Zulpha's family there, but also there were a whole horde of protesters and very angry ones, and they did not agree and not want to support Zulpha and did not understand the reasoning for her murder of a child. Walid's mother and Tariq's grandmother said that Walid has been absolutely distraught. She also said, quote, "He has gone for a walk. It's almost like he's in denial because he told his friend that if he gets hold of the person who did this, he's really going to do something," end quote. Which is quite sad because I'm assuming that he is in denial, that he doesn't believe that his wife is actually capable of murdering their child in such a gruesome and horrific way. But in the end, Zulpha Jacobs was sentenced to 20 years behind bars after taking a plea deal, and there was no word about whether police could prove she had anything to do with her first 2 children's death. So I don't think she was ever charged with that, only the murder of her son, Tariq. Oh, as a side note, when Zulpha was first arrested, she did tell police that she was pregnant, so the trial was delayed for a week or so, and it was proven that she actually wasn't pregnant, so the trial went ahead, and she was then sentenced to 20 years behind bars. But that's the case of Tariq Jacobs, and I find this case very difficult to close because what did we just hear? What is it that we had to speak about now? And I find it so tragic and so senseless. Difficult to understand where Zulpha even was coming from. I understand that she wrote a letter and I understand that she was going through a very difficult time, but there are a lot of people going through horrible marriages and they would never think of taking the innocent lives of their children. And this isn't the first case that we've spoken about on this channel where people take it out on their children with regards to what's happening in their marriage, what's happening to them mentally. So I think it's very difficult, but I also find it very difficult to justify why you would murder your children. And I mean children as in toddlers and babies who are absolutely defenseless. I don't know, it's just a very horrible case. And I do feel very bad and terrible for the families who are involved, because they didn't only lose Tariq. Walid's mother actually said that she feels horrible because this is the second boy that her and her son have lost. Her being her grandchild and also her son being both of his boys. And it's obviously damaged a lot of lives going forward. But that's enough from me and enough rambling. Please stay safe out there. Thank you very much for all your continued support. I appreciate all of your lovely comments. Thank you again, and I'll see you again next week. Bye.